Hi, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday, the 6th of March. Today, we have the second part of my interview with Dale Foong and Val Mathews, the Project Chatter guys. Speak to you later. Again this week we are sponsored by Tamplo. Tamplo turns meetings into action plans, and we all want better meetings, don't we? How many of us spend too much time in meetings, and how many spend too much time in meetings that just are no good, and we think we shouldn't be there? I heard a story that Elon Musk said that people should leave their meetings after 10 minutes in his organisations if the meetings, they don't need to be there or don't understand why they're there. But what happens if you need that person there? It's just that they didn't know they needed to be there. Well, Tamplo can help. With their meeting structures within their cloud-based service, you can create structure for meetings and meaning for meetings, with a clear agenda, setting meeting parameters to stick to a plan. Shared, and how often do you get that situation where you have someone like me maybe who takes off down a rabbit hole? Well, that's it. You can use this tool to keep to that. The shared agenda you can create allows those rabbit holes to be identified early and become fully prepared, and have all the invitees add information into those agendas where they need things to be talked about, so no surprises. You can lead the meeting through using Tamplo and each item and record the information or decisions or actions live in Tamplo and also through Microsoft Teams. You can add comments, decisions and assign tasks as you're doing it. None of this, looking through your notebook and deciding what was it that someone said, who said they'd do that. You're doing it there, and it's going to drop into their dashboard. Meetings are also minutes sent to all invitees, so they know it's all there, but you're not having to sit back and create those meetings later on. And they're available for everyone to look back over time. Ideal for using recurrent meetings where you want to see all of those decisions that step through, but you don't want to look through 100 different Word documents that are ordered in a weird SharePoint site in a weird order because someone saved the document as a different name. The meetings become shorter and more enjoyable, or as enjoyable as a meeting can be. It allows you to stick to an agenda and be more collaborative. And no one leaves the meeting not knowing what they should be doing or who's doing it, because it's all there in Tamplo. So your meetings are better. But then, have we all been to meetings that have been brilliant and superb? I've been to some. They've been really good. But then nothing happens after those meetings. All of the tasks that were allocated, all the things weren't chased up, weren't chased down in it, and all of it drifts. That's where Tamplo can help again. The project and task management and follow-up capabilities of the tool provide a clear dashboard with an overview of scheduled tasks, alerts on tasks, and overview of team's progress, so you can track what's going on, and I can track what I need to do. You can create your own daily plan of tasks that you want to work on or check in on with the others. Easy task assignment, and then adding deadlines and degree of importance, who the owner is, and followers. You can follow them. Clear descriptions, and you can upload documents too. So it's all in one place. Easy project management with dedicated dashboard, lists of tasks, and what people are working on, so you can see in one place as a PM what people are doing. It's a collaborative tool with all documents uploaded in one place with stress-free feedback, and you manage a validation of status and comments. You can assign tasks to individuals or to teams. So again, if you've got those self-managing teams, that can be done without you being, it can be clear that team A has that, they can put it on their backlog maybe. So no task is left undone, and the tracking is transparent to everyone. There's more efficiency, more motivation, and change status is clear once tasks are completed. It gives a clear actions plan, more structure, and hopefully more projects completed on time. And as PMs, if we can complete projects on time and more efficiency, don't we want to do it? The product's easy, intuitive, it gets your work done with peace of mind and more efficiency and more collaboration. So if you want to have a look, I have a URL you can pop along to called tinyurl.com/Nigel Creaser Tamplo. That's Nigel Creaser Tamplo, all one word, and it's Tamplo. If you don't know how to spell Nigel Creaser, it's Creaser. And I get a little kickback if you decide to sign up for the full service or one of the subscribed values. But there's a trial. You get a 14-day trial, I think it is, and to try it out and see. Well, actually, it's a full month trial, so you can get a month's worth of being more productive and trying this out with you and your team. So get on it, have a go at it, and enjoy your better meetings and better to follow with Tamplo. So, what's been going on? Obviously, at the time it is now, for those listening, it's the 4th of March when I'm recording this, and the biggest thing that's going on in everyone's lives at the moment, I think, is the Russian activities and invasion and war with Ukraine, and it's heartbreaking to see. I couldn't not mention that on this call. I don't on this recording. Typically, I don't talk about the news, but in this instance, I just my heart goes out to any of the people involved in this, and uh, the Ukrainian people, the Russian people, um, the people fighting. Uh, words kind of forget. I just can't understand them when it appears to be one person driving this, and I just hope that in the coming weeks, this all um, is gone and behind us, and I just hope for a quick resolution of it all. Really, I just wanted to say that, and as I say, my thoughts go out to everyone out there. In project management and my life sort of things have been fairly quiet, really, just chugging along. A couple of podcast interviews that I've done recently. I've got Peter Capelli and Alan Mosh coming up in the next few weeks after today's episode, and a few other people lined up for interviews, which will be coming quite soon. Obviously, next week we have International Women's Day, and I would say on 8th of March, I think it is, and I've been very fortunate to have some incredible interviewees on the podcast, some leaders in this field, and I urge you to go back over the back catalogue, have a listen to some of those fantastic women that I've had on this podcast, and thank you to all those women for coming on the podcast and sharing their experiences and their knowledge. It's quite a downplayed one today with me on this. A couple of things that have happened in the last week or so. Elizabeth Harron surprised me with her latest newsletter, bigging up the podcast, talking about specifically about the interview that I did with Craig McKay. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you for doing that. So returning the favour for anyone who's listening who's isn't aware of Elizabeth's work, she has the Rebel's Guide to Project Management, and has a vast amount of information and training that she provides, and she has a new book coming out fairly soon as well, I think. Pop along to Rebels Guide to PM.com and find out more about Elizabeth that way. The other quick shout out really is for an event that Steve Wake is running in the next few weeks, which is called, I'm just pausing while I click and dig out the timetable for it. It's the EVA 26 event, which is a couple of days with some fantastic speakers, some of the people I've had on my podcast, including Karen Thompson. I note they have Paul Lias, the EVA poet in residence, who was at the PMI event that I went to a little while back, and he's really good, really entertaining, a really interesting way of presenting stuff. but yeah, it's a packed couple of days with some incredible speakers. So pop along to or just it's in London on March 16th and March 17th, and it's if you I think if you just Google EVA 26, maybe Steve Wake, you'll find all the details you know. Now I'll put some links in the podcast in the show notes. So yeah, so jump along, grab a ticket there, and that's it really. There's nothing much to say that I can think about. And so what I'll do, I'll let you get on with the second part of this interview with the Project Chatter guys. Thanks very much, and stay safe, everyone. Look after yourselves. How do we interpret what that business user story is, the business requirement, into an actual piece of technology or into a building or whatever? It's difficult to do that at the moment and create that programming. And I think the only way to do it is get that AI pulling that data out, isn't it? And that becomes, you get lots of privacy issues and things like that, really, because you're mining data that is you've got to, I think you've got to go for those non-structured conversations and in some ways you've got to sit there and go, right, in every meeting we need to record everything, and when we're recording it, then it gets dropped into the AI bucket, analyzes that meeting, understands decisions that are being made, and then pulls that together with the email conversations that related to that followed after, and the decision log, and then you start joining all those together and go, everybody thought the different thing there. Guys, we've got a red problem here because you've got 15 people charged off to do some work and they're doing 15 different things. Bring them back together. Let's get them back on plate. And that starts to become massively powerful and really useful, but also quite scary. It'd be hard.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think actually I have a theory about this. I don't think our generation is ready for this. So when it comes to transformation, we're talking about, you can't go back. I don't think we have that innate ability to adapt that well. And I think we're on the cusp. So I think Dale and I but if you look at the next generation, when it comes to change, adoption with technology in particular, no problem.
Yeah.
You got babies playing around iPhones and iPads. They can flick through, they can bypass passwords. Like people and kids, we didn't have that, right? I remember when the internet
and I'm older
out.
than you two.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's right. I remember the first computer we had. It was a big ass floppy, and it took ages. It loaded and made this awful sound. And I think for us, there's still some element of tangibility, right? We need some connection back to the physical realm. Whereas now, if you think about the metaverse and NFTs and blockchain and EOIs and Internet of Things, really is going to be a game changer. I mean, even this morning, this is interesting for you, that we went for an EOI, right, for a government agency, and it's very early days for quantum computing, right? And we went for a briefing, and I won't bore your listeners with quantum because I find it hard to explain either. They said, so how far off are we from this, solution? They said, 10, 20 years, but we got to start today. I was like, well, I love the aspiration and the ambition, and having a goal, I think, is good. And I think back to that point we were talking about before, sometimes we don't have the people and we don't have enough talented resources and skills, labor. There's a bit of a field of dreams type scenario. So if we build it, they will come type scenario. I don't know if you remember that Kevin Costner movie.
Yeah, I do.
But
James Earl Jones and Ray Liotta.
Yeah, exactly. It's a classic for anyone who hasn't seen it.
Film.
What happens a lot of the time with capital projects, even with defense capability and other big projects, they just go, well, if we build it, the people will come. And that's a bit of a whim, but it does happen like that. Now, I think project management is another example of a disaster waiting to happen in terms of the gap. So the projects are getting bigger and the skills gap is getting wider. If you ask the average PM or PMO person about data or digital, there's a very large gap. And that's just from my observations. I haven't done any census data on this, and you can tell me your experiences, but I think it's running away from us. And it's not like they have to understand it. Like we can operate an iPhone without understanding how the iPhone works. but we're not giving them enough interface understanding so they understand how to operate those machines and those tools.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether that's up to anyone other than themselves. I think what's happening in the new generation is it's all self-initiated. If you look at where training's going now, it's all on demand, self-initiated, accessible everywhere. You can literally train yourself on anything you want, pay nothing for it or very little, and learn infinitely all this stuff that we're talking about today. And so I think that's what's going to happen. It's going to be the next generation self-initiating the learning and then getting involved in projects. But we have to make it fun as well. I think, Fred said it this morning, Dale, gamifying. How do you get young people interested in engineering and construction if we're playing with Excel spreadsheets? It's a good question. Young guy comes out fully digital savvy, right? Been playing with an iPad since he was 2, and then goes, oh God, what are these guys doing?
Yeah.
I'm going to go sit on a beanbag at Facebook and twiddle my thumbs over there and play around. So
at the end of the day, they're going to be sitting there going, and I think of myself as a technologist. And I'm not I get in there. I run my life with my phone. That's how I do it. I do everything on there. I would love to be in a situation where you're running if you're running a project on your phone, on your watch, pops up your RAG status for something that comes up because AI spotted something. Right, we've got a decision log problem with this. I'd have notifications turned off during non-work hours, so I got my own time or through meetings and stuff. But you know what I mean? And that's the kind of thing you're going to want. They're going to, why am I having to log on to a corporate network on this computer when I've got a mobile phone that could give me all of the things I need, that I can connect to my TV and I can have a big screen version of it, or I can stick it with me VR goggles and I can be doing this with it. And it's going to drive those tools, isn't it? That the why is it not there questions will be, why, as you say, me spreadsheet. Why are we using a spreadsheet when we should be industrializing some of these tools and turn them? Because when we mentioned it before, I just wrote, I'm really surprised that, and there probably is something out there, and I've used some similar things where if you've created a spreadsheet yourself and it's like that tactical solution, why isn't there an app that just comes in, press a button, pulls that spreadsheet together, and there you've got an HTML5 web app created automatically, or 90%, 80% there, and then you have to tweak the little bits in there because it's maybe I shouldn't be talking about this in public because it might be my next £1 million idea. I've got a lot of those in a pile on the floor, but it just makes you think: can we? You've got to bring, you say we've got to invite people in. I remember 2 years ago when PMI changed their logo and their branding, and there was quite a bit of noise I saw on LinkedIn and Facebook and things like that from the project management community of, it's a bit, don't like that. It doesn't, and it was very different. I don't know if you remember the change at the time. You got the old PMI view was a kind of old looking traditional certification herald kind of thing, and they changed it to some bright colors, some very different abstractions in there. And I started going, I don't like this. And then I thought about it, and I realized the industry had enough middle-aged grey-haired blokes. Yeah, it's full of middle-aged grey-haired blokes, many of whom are retiring, dying, changing careers because they're fed up. And actually, where's that people coming in from? Who's filling the gap? And that gap needs to be looking at youth, and you're competing against Google, you're competing against Facebook, you're competing against building the latest phone app or the game for Facebook, or in the gaming industry. I saw something the other day, was the gaming industry actually is bigger than the movie and music industry put together these days, which kind of what? So you're competing for those kind of talent, and unless it looks relevant to them, it's not going to attract them. There was no need to attract me. I was been in the PMI for since 2002. I've been part of their UK chapter and things like that. So I've already invested. You haven't got to sell it to me. It's selling it to the right people and having the the tools and the techniques within our industry that are up to date enough to keep people in there, and making it sexy. And it's, for one of a better word, how do you make project management sexy? And actually, project management isn't sexy. It's being, and I talked to someone at a university, and I think it's being able to change the world is where we need to be talking to people about as an industry, because that's what we do. We change the world. We make those transformations. We enable those changing, and that's what you're getting to do. Whatever that specific area you want to work in, you want to work in environmental, you want to look in social responsibility, you want to work in the highest tech, building new cars, whatever it is, you're changing the world. By every piece of project that delivers changes the world. Sorry, I've got on a soapbox there a little bit.
It's great though. It's great to go on soapboxes. It's your podcast. You can do whatever you want.
That is the lovely thing about you having your own podcast, isn't it, guys? It is. And actually, it probably leads us on quite, because we haven't talked about that, about you and why you started the podcast and things like that. But it's kind of, I'll give my little bit, not delve down into it much. I'll give my little bit of a reasoning why I did it. Is a few years ago, I played around with, I scribbled a book, which has taken the mick out of our lovely industry, called When I Were a Project Manager, based on the Monty Python four Yorkshiremen thing. And I kind of did it because it was kind of a bit of an ego thing, and I had this idea and I fancied it, doing it, and I released it. And then I thought a few years later, I fancy a podcast, fancy doing that. So I basically thought, I know what I'll do. I'll use that to promote my book. So I was shouting into the internet, buy my book, for a year or so. And that was the reason I started it. Completely self-interest, no philanthropic view. I was kind of see if I could shift some of these books and promote them a bit, massage my ego. And then a few years later, I thought, actually, if I added value by interviewing people might listen, and I might then be able to promote it as well. And I think I've heard you guys say is that the thing that surprised me was how much I enjoyed talking to people about this industry, how much astounding stories that I got. And it drops back to our previous conversation as well, was how people got into project management, and not one of, I think, what was it, one at minute, one is the maximum, as I don't think any of them really said, when I've asked them the question, what did you want to grow up and be when you grow up? Not one of them said a project manager. And the one that shocked me the most is a guy who was growing up in Cyprus around the time when there was the war-torn areas around there. And he said he just wanted to be safe. And he moved from there, he moved to Germany, he was doing different things, he does different projects. And it's kind of like, it kind of stepped, again, me sitting in a stable Western country, in a reasonably middle-class, privileged lifestyle. And then you see someone who grew up, who just wanted to be safe, and moves into our industry, but had never heard of project management. And 90% of the people I've talked to are saying have never heard of project management doing it. So how do we get people in it? So what made, do you want to just chat about what made you, before that, I'm going to, Dale, what did you want to be when you grew up? Or what do you want to be when you grow up? Whichever's relevant at the moment.
So funnily enough, so Val and I actually interviewed each other in one of our it's within the first 10 episodes of Project Chatter. And I said, I've gone through many iterations of what I think I want to be when I grow up, and I'm still going through those iterations at the moment. So it keeps changing and evolving, and I think it's that continuous growth. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I had a clear picture, going into university and, what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to contribute. I knew I wanted to be sort of in business, and, the traditional societal success looks like, you got to have a certain amount of wealth potentially, or live in a certain area, or behave a certain way, and be part of a potentially a certain class, or whatever the case may be. So that's societal expectations, but I don't think that was my own internal expectation. And it's quite interesting, because you have to take the sum of those two parts to sort of give you what motivates you and what drives you, right? Because there's external and internal forces. So it's an interesting question, and one I don't think I can give you a clear answer on. But if I may, I just wanted to comment just briefly back before you jump to Val and ask him what he wants to be. Just back on your sort of narrative around why can't we have status updates on phones and things like that. We can today. We have the likes of Power BI, but it takes, you have to do something bespoke in order to get it.
Yep.
But the other thing that I think attracts the new generation, other than technology, is actually purpose.
Yeah.
And the way you generate purpose is through storytelling. And the way you become good storytellers is you listen to others and you tell stories yourself. And then that leads me onto the podcast as well. And we'll get into that. But Val and I have very much, and we've spoken about this offline, we've gone through a journey on the Project Chatter podcast where you listen to us in the first 10 episodes. It's horrible. It's terrible. It's absolute tripe. But we've learned along that journey how to speak, how to listen, more importantly than speak as well. So it's communication skill, I think, is hugely, hugely fundamental to getting that next generation in as well. How do we give them a purpose? How do we, sort of package together with the technology what they can actually achieve? You mentioned things like, the environment and what we should be doing, and, sustainability and all of that, and providing that purpose as well as a really, really fascinating, interesting profession to get in, I think will really help. But getting back to it, I think I found, in many senses, Nigel, what I want to be when I grow up, because I can wholeheartedly say I'm thoroughly enjoying my time doing what I'm doing today. And regardless of how unclear I was back then in my university days of what I wanted to become, I think and I think this is probably true for many people, you kind of find your way. And as long as you approach it with the right attitude, a bit of positivity, a bit of empathy along your journey, and an open mindset, you'll find, what you are meant to be doing at the end of the day, because it might not be perfect. It might not what you set out to do at the beginning, but you find something, you go, you know what, this is actually a hell of a lot of fun. So yeah, I don't know if that quite answers your question, Nigel, but maybe Val is a better answer for you.
It's your answer to that question, so it's right. That's the thing of that question. You can never give a wrong answer to that question, in my opinion. Go on, Val. You try and give a wrong answer.
I forgot the question now, Nigel.
What did you, when you were a kid, what did you want to do when you grew up? Or was it, did you want to be a project manager, which I'm assuming not from our conversation?
No,
or in the project arena.
I'm still figuring out. I'll tell you two interesting things. So I think one side of me wanted to be in the firefight, wanted to be a firefighter, right? Which is pretty obvious for a boy. That's a pretty standard thing, like a cop or. But if you dig it a little bit deeper, I think that's about helping people and being a member of the community and a contributor, which I think really relates to me now. So I think, I kind of tick the box in that area. The other one is to be an artist. So my mother's an artist, my grandmother, my sister, I'm kind of the weird one who didn't go down the creative route. Even my wife and my kids, they're all very artistic. And so there's this creative side to me that I used to, and an element of entrepreneurialism. So when I was a kid, I used to draw pictures of Jordan. I was fascinated with Jordan. He was like one of my idols. I used to play basketball all the time. I used to draw these pictures, right? And I don't know how old I was. I must have been like, I'm going to say 6, something like that. It was a really early age. I've got a fragmented memory, but I kind of remember these ones. And I would take those pictures and I'd put them in my lunchbox and I would go to school, and I had made a deal with my teacher that at recess time, I would hang them up in the back of the room and I would sell them to my fellow classmates.
Excellent.
For 10 cents, 20 cents, 50 cents a pop, and I'd come home with money. And my mother would be like, "Where'd you get this from?" I said, "I've been selling my pictures from." She didn't believe me, right? So I kind of had this flair for, I guess, business acumen. I liked the entrepreneurialism and the creativity of it. And I don't know how I ended up in the Navy then, because that doesn't make sense. But coming back full swing now, I guess the reason I left is I like to invent things. I like to keep myself. I'm comfortable in the uncomfortable, and I think what project controls and PMO has shown me is that it's a very difficult job. It's multifaceted, and I tend to have many spinning plates, as Dale will tell you, and I actually find some equilibrium with that. There's something damaged about that, and I guess a lot of people are. But I can have 3 or 4 plates spinning at the same time, and that for me is a good pace. And so I was looking for something that would challenge me enough to keep those 3 plates spinning, if you like. And I think I found it. I think that's what projects are. They're a mess, right? If you think about all these great, grandiose institutions providing these, vacuum sealed methodologies and knowledge areas of this is how you would deliver a project. Then you get to the project and you're like, holy, can I swear here?
Yeah.
Holy shit. This is nuts. Absolutely crazy. Everybody's off their nut doing random stuff, literally running around the office. I remember being in many, many projects. You've got admins running around, there's a meeting going on. Why aren't you in it? She goes, oh, am I meant to be in it? Okay, I'll jump in. So this, I guess, adrenaline that you get on a project, bit of a project junkie, I guess, that I love it because end of the day is you walk out of there and you're contributing, as you said, you're building things, you're building the future, you're building infrastructure. I do a lot of transport projects now. So there's a social contribution, rail, roads, infrastructure, schools, you feel like you're part of this. And when I'm an old man, I can walk down the street and I can say to my daughter, I was part of that project and that project and that project. I don't know. And then I think the last bit of that, I still don't think I'm right where I need to be, but the podcast, as Dale said, has certainly opened me up to all the fascinating areas that I didn't know were in project management. Virtual reality, blockchain, all these different kind of facets that are falling out of it, technology, some of the methodologies, leadership, behaviors. I actually find, back to your point as well, Dale, that leadership is a real crucial part to attracting talent. I feel like in my life, I've been very blessed to have great managers. And I guess the podcast has inspired me to kind of give back as well. But I myself have had many of my staff follow me from company to company. And I feel like that to me is a good compliment. It's a representation of my leadership style. And I think, okay, that's good, because that means good people are coming with me, and then I can attract other good people and start to build my little clique. This is how these projects get done. I actually think projects get done, not just necessarily on good people, but heroic efforts. There's a lot of gray matter, let's call it, of people just getting by, right? They'll do the 9 to 5, but we all know what happens. It's the people that are working 7 a.m. in the morning to 11 p.m. at night that really get the project across the line. It's those 99% deliverables, that last day, the day one handover to operations. Those guys that stick around drive the projects. But I'll stop talking. That's enough for me.
No, I think I agree with everything you said there, and I think it's the thing that stands out a little bit there is that I've described project management as an art, and as a creative, if you're a sculptor, you learn how to use a hammer to feather and do the images of a feather, or a painter, you learn how to blend stuff in. You learn all those tools, but those are the tools you learn how to use. You can be really good at doing all of those individual components and paint something awful. You can, or sculpt something awful. To be able to paint, although I'm not entirely sure that Van Gogh was that good, from my personal opinion, but you know what I mean. You paint the sunflowers in the way it does. That there's something extra that needs to be added in there, and that's where I think that the project manager and the project management community is where that creativity, where I'm kind of feel the same sort of thing. And I think maybe it's just us, but like we're doing this podcast, I'm doing my podcast, you're doing yours, because it feels like a creative process to me. It's something in there. I messed around with guitars. I'm doing a bit of writing and creating some code. There's always something that I think it's something that is, I think it's in us as humans as well, that to take something from nothing and make something out of it is what you want to do. And the other thing that popped up in my head then was you guys have had Peter Taylor on your show, haven't you? Lazy project manager?
Not yet. No.
There's a recommendation for you. And he talks about his book, The Lazy Project Manager, where he talks about the shape of projects being like a dinosaur, or is it the other way around? I can't remember. Anyway, at the beginning of your project, you put in lots of effort. Yeah, you got loads and loads of effort in there. In the middle, it should be, if you've done the effort at the beginning, right, and that's where you're going into a new project, you don't know what's going on. You've got all these strings that you're pulling together and you're running on adrenaline, and you eventually corral it into something that's got a flow and a rhythm to the deliveries. And then you come towards the end of it and you've got to push it over the line, haven't you? And that's where you've got to get everyone there and just shove it over the line that you need to. And again, I think that's both of those ends, you're using your creative skills much more than you are in the middle. In the middle is run-of-the-mill routine, do that right. Occasionally you get spikes where you've got to keep things on track. But the big effort potentially is at either end, isn't it? That's a kind of a thing that I see there, is that, and again, creativity comes in there.
Yeah, I think so. Just to add to that, I think it's funny because the biggest risks are at the start and the end. And I think the best time to make effective decisions is in the middle.
Yeah.
Where you do have the ability to change the outcome, where you do have the ability to focus on the results and try and ascertain what the risks are to the program. Just while you're talking, I was just thinking, how you pick that up in terms of risks? I think in my mind, I see risks. You mentioned guitar, so I see risks and interactions with the project as like a musical blip, and the frequency increases as the deliverables get to those constraints at the end, right? There's key milestones that we have to hit. And you look at some of these big projects and yet they still slip to the right. And so there's something to be said about the fact that monitoring and controlling isn't the issue. I think moral leadership, I talked about Sarah Palmer a few times, Dale, on our show. She stuck in my head a real good phrase which I still have, is the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, or something similar to that. And the idea is that, if everyone goes along, we play along, and then by the time you do get to the end of that dinosaur or the end of the project, it's obviously too late to change anything at all. You're kind of on this kind of slippery slope, right? You're on a bit of ice and you're just heading towards that finish line, regardless of the quality. Now let's get this thing done. Let's get it over the line, hand it back to the client, and we're done with this project. Whereas that's not really the way to deliver a project. So I think there's an element of real leadership that's required in these projects to actually execute them properly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Al, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, we again, we can go down so many different rabbit holes. Leadership is huge. It's multiple podcast episodes all in one, just that leadership topic. And yeah, I think we've said it before, is that typically, if you look historically, Nigel, I think leaders haven't been equipped to lead, right? They've been
historically, I think so. In some cases, even now. But anyway,
yeah,
that's another rabbit hole.
Yeah. Historically and currently, I agree. But what I'm saying is that they've typically been perhaps the subject matter expert, or just been around long enough. Yeah. And if you ask a lot of them sometimes, and Val and I actually did this when we worked together, we asked some people that were work package managers, like, do you want to do this? And they're like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to lead people. I don't want to report on stuff and be accountable.
Yeah.
I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And so you force people into these roles that they don't want to do and they're not equipped to do. And you wonder why the project fails.
Yeah. And people don't train them either, do they?
Exactly.
There's many things, project sponsors and product ownership in Agile. You get, even if it's not in the actual project leadership area, those are the people who are absolutely critical to the success of the project. And if they are not trained in what their responsibilities are, understand what they are, and do them, you're on a hide into nothing, aren't you?
Well, if I add to that, they do get training. They go on a one-day leadership course.
That's not training.
I know.
just because someone has a what's it, a Belbin assessment in their inbox doesn't mean they've been trained in leadership or in decision making, does it?
We've joked plenty around, these 1 to 3 to 5 day courses, and all of a sudden, you're an expert, and it doesn't work like that, as you say.
No.
But I mean, back to, I guess, your original question around the podcast as well for us was to talk about all these various topics, to put it out there, to be a little bit disruptive and say, is there a better way? What do you think? Why doesn't things work? Why do we fail? Are there better ways? Sharing ideas and insight. And a lot of this has just been behind paywalls. And so Val and I said, well, why don't we just make it freely available to everyone?
Yeah.
And it's unscripted. It's not it's exactly like yours. And you know what? People love that. Well, that's certainly the feedback we're getting, is that it's just people openly, freely sharing their thoughts and their views. And it's not a prepared webinar where you're coming along and someone's presenting at you. You can listen, you can pause, you can stop and think and rewind. And we have a bit of fun doing it as well. I mean, Val and I aren't afraid to take the piss out of each other and ourselves and be vulnerable and ask the stupid questions, that people don't want to answer. Or answer perhaps.
Yeah.
But other than our selfish reasons of actually we've gained a hell of a lot of insight talking to these various guests, I shared a story from the recent Project Controls Expo I attended, where just one of the other delegates, after one of the presentations, we just started chatting about the actual presentation, and she said to me, "Are you on a podcast? I recognize your voice." I'm like, oh, okay, this is embarrassing now. And
embarrassing and good, I imagine.
Yeah, embarrassing and good, because the end result was, she said to me, "You know what? I want to thank you, because you're famous in our household for all the right reasons, because I'm new to the industry. I'm new to project controls. And based on what I heard from your back catalog and your podcast, I got to my interview. I understand the profession. I understand what I need to do to excel."
Fantastic.
And I was like, wow, that just vindicated what we're doing, because as Val, I think, hinted at earlier, the reason we do the podcast is to pay it forward and grow the community. And just that one piece of feedback just gave me so much more drive and energy to continue doing it. So that is the reason we set out, and that is, just so nice and heartwarming to hear. But Val, did you have different reasons for our podcast? Come on, we contrary to popular belief, Val and I don't always agree on anything. We might co-host a podcast, but we disagree on plenty.
No, you mentioned that before, Nigel, about language and how we don't speak properly. So, you're talking to an Australian and South African, and we don't understand each other. So it was like, what are you talking about? I think I just started the podcast because I missed Dale, honestly. I come back to Australia, Dale was stuck over there. It was during COVID. So think about it, right? We started doing them in our car. Like, I was in my car sitting in because I didn't want to upset my wife. She was sleeping. I was doing it at 6 a.m. in the morning because of the time difference. Now I don't give a shit. But I used to care about not waking him up. And I didn't want him to hear me talk about shop. For some reason, I never brought work home. It was weird, right? Normal days, if you've got a normal job, like maybe you're an AMBO, or I don't know, you work as an accountant, you'd come home, you talk about work. But I came home and I realized, like, no one would know what the hell I was talking about anyway. I mean, they still think, my whole family still thinks I'm in project management. Now, if I went down the facet road, okay, we are kind of part of a collective group. Okay, yeah, fine. So I can handle that. But honestly, if anyone asked really what we did, they'd be bored in 2 seconds. Their eyes would glaze over like Krispy Kremes, and they'd be like, "Okay, well, anyway, how's the weather?"
We change the world. That's what we do.
That's what we do. We change the world. Thank you, Nigel. Can I get that in writing, sir? So look, I think for me, it's it is about that paying forward element, and I think it's what happened.
I just dropped a pen.
It's okay. It was dramatic. It was great. I loved it. I think it's important that we have critical thinking back. And what happened to debating and discussing and discourse and having difference of opinion, but then talking it out rather than slander and kind of cyberbullying and cancel culture? I think there's a lot of that going on. I mean, we've had guests that talk about it, and there's a lot of angst in society. And I was like, well, I believe in critical thinking. And funnily enough, it's not one of the things that are taught at project management, but I think it's important that we understand how to rationalize and how do we draw facts from opinions? And obviously this is a real big problem in the world, not just in project management, but in general. Misinformation, disinformation. I mean, I'm teaching my 11-year-old daughter, Nigel, about this. Like, where did you get that information? She'll be like, apparently this is what happened at school today, and they heard it on something. What was the source? You know, you have to really inquire now and teach them why. But in project management, I think before the podcasts come along, we didn't really have that avenue. You could ask an instructor if you had a class that was led by an instructor. You could ask them, and they would give you their view, but it would be very short. You know, you'd probably have a Q&A at the end of your 2-day certification. Get your piece of paper. Go, oh, Mister, I had one more question. I mean, they'll give you a very short answer. Like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But that's not really what we're trying to do. I think yours is the same, Nigel, with long form as well.
Yeah.
You know, we try to start off with. I think we try to start off with 30 minutes or half an hour once a month or something. And then we went to weekly, and then it went to an hour, and then it went to an hour and a half. And some people went for 2 hours. I'm like, geez, we could talk about this forever. Yeah. But with long form discussion comes long form thinking. And like we're doing now, ideas pop in your head as someone is conversing. And you're like, well, you made another good point. And then your perception changes because you need to respond to that. And that response adds to that knowledge library in your brain. And I think you do it long enough, you don't become a genius, but you certainly have, I guess, a more open mind to difference of opinion, and realize that none of us are right. We're all kind of experiencing life in our own way, in our own model. And Alfred Korzybski, who wrote about semantics, he had a great phrase, which was, the map is not the territory. I don't know if you've ever heard this. So it doesn't matter how detailed the map is. It is not the physical reality. And you've seen how terrible Google Maps is, or even worse, Apple Maps. So the maps that we draw and the maps of meaning that we imply or infer from those inside our brains is not the base reality. And that's what's interesting about when you have a project, because you have all these mixed diversities of thought and difference of opinions and cultures and languages. It can be very spicy, but I kind of like that picante. It's fun.
Yeah. It's the when you sit there trying to agree with the team and maybe a manager and a couple of the RAG status of a project, that's a really good way at times to be able to create a good image of a different of opinion and a different lens, or those different maps on what's going on. Because I have sat there going, well, it's knackered, we're not doing anything, we can't do anything. And you'll be sitting there chatting, saying, well, and someone else going, yeah, but it's not red, is it? We're not dead in the water yet. And it'll be depending on those. And there's a behavioral model called the DISC model that I'm a big fan of, because it's very simple. I like simple and straightforward. And you can kind of sit there talking with people and sit there go, right, I know what type of person you are based on how you decide the RAG status, and I know what kind of person you are. And you've got people who are really bullish, people who are really sort of thinking, well, we haven't got enough people, so they're more in that other camp. And you can actually sit there and go, yeah, okay. And then you as the delivery manager or project manager, you've got to sit there, well, how do we do this? Because how many times have you sat there and gone, right, what is us as a project or as an organization? What is our definition of red? What is our clear? What are the criteria to make something red, amber, yellow, whatever, all the different colors that people use these days? And that is like a minefield. And it really does. It's a little microcosm of those different opinions and different lenses that we all have.
Yeah, 100%. I was just going to add to that. Almost every podcast we have, Dale, don't we? We if there's some ambiguity, I'll always try and get the guest to define it for us, because of that very notion that I'm not sure, particularly if it's more abstract, right? Yeah. I'm not sure what I know and what you know is the same thing. Are we talking about the same thing? Because it changes the conversation if it does. And I'm probably more of the idiot than the guest, right? So I'm probably wrong, and I need to baseline, or at least assimilate to their model of the world before I go and then question him about it. And I think that's a very useful thing to do. So yeah, very good.
Yeah. Because we talked about the podcast, different opinions and stuff. I've got the interview that I did about productivity with a colleague in the marketing arena, and they've got their own podcast. And the thing that I talked about there in one section I've been talking about was remote working, and how COVID had affected everyone, and some tips and tricks about it. And Joel, to his credit, said, well, I think I'm going to put out an opinion here. I think this remote working is inevitable, but it's shite. It's shite, and it's not as good as working together. And we had an interesting conversation around that, and kind of and he's right and he's wrong, in my opinion, on that. And it was one of those things. It was a depends conversation. And it went, we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole on that. But as you say, in my opinion, it'll be very unpopular. And but it's in those sort of scenarios, there is opinions on effectiveness, and different industries change, don't they? So again, it's that map. It's my map of I was managing a team of people who were distributed around the UK. So even if we had working in an office, it made no difference to the effectiveness of me and that team, because I didn't see him. He's got a team who they're based in a central area, and they've got a team that work together, and they do lots of collaborative work, knocking ideas off each other, and it kind of, their lens and their map is completely different. And sometimes we forget that where someone else is coming from. And you talked about communication, leadership, and all the stakeholder management stuff. That's what half of that is, isn't it? Is being able to sit there and go, right, let's take me out of this picture and let's put them in the picture and try and understand them, listen to them, as one of you mentioned earlier, and go and understand their point of view. And then you can kind of come to that middle ground where you can either get an understanding, or just the fact that you understand why they are of a certain opinion or a certain method that they use. So guys, I think that's been a fantastic conversation, and I've got a list of rabbit holes that we could go down to, including let's talk about quantum projects, because you mentioned quantum computing, and there's what's a quantum project's rag status, and kind of thinking that until you look at the project, it's both red and green, and therefore has the potential to deliver all of the business benefits and none. Correct. But as soon as you start looking at it, that's when it collapses, that quantum wave. But then Schrodinger's cat, if anyone wants to understand what I'm talking about there. So if people want to listen to Project Chatter, want to get in touch with you two guys, what's the best thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, the website, projectchatterpodcast.com. We're on LinkedIn. I mean, similar to you, Nigel, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the main podcast players, Anchor, etc. But
you guys use Anchor, don't you?
We do use Anchor. Yeah,
it's good. I find it a really good product. Sorry to jump in there, and I'm guessing that's why you were sat in the car on the phone, using that dial-in section that you could use on the phone.
Yeah, so we weren't using Anchor back then, but we've actually really upgraded from our cars. We don't sit in our cars anymore. We've got this amazing virtual background, as you can see. So we pretend to be in this awesome studio, when in fact all we've done is just upgraded the mics, and it makes us sound much better. And no, but I mean, get in touch with us on LinkedIn. Probably we're both quite active on that. Val and I are open to talking to anyone. Is there anywhere else, Val, where you've put us? I don't know where you the IT guy behind all of it.
Yeah, look, the website's good. I think we're getting a lot more traffic on YouTube now. It's bizarre, right? So why would you go to listen to a podcast on YouTube? But it seems to be a thing now. And so you can, if you want to see us and our clown faces, and actually it's pretty good when some of our guests actually do end up bringing, even though we don't ask them to, bring presentations, and they're like, do you mind if I share screen? This isn't a project meeting, but yeah, sure, go for it. So they will. And so if you really want the details, sometimes it's worth checking out the YouTube. But everything Dale said, and that's it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, guys. It's been a blast, and you have a brilliant rest of your day.
Thank you very much. And
cheers,
thanks,
guys.
mate.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care.
Thanks to Dale and Val for being on the podcast. Fantastic chat with them. They have lots and lots of chats with lots of people on their podcast, so pop along to their podcast, Project Chatter Podcast. It's really good, and I even featured on it one week, so you can even have a listen to me more if you want to. That's it, really. Next episode in a couple of weeks, we have the Professor of Management guy, Peter Capelli. So don't miss that, and speak to you soon. If you enjoyed the show, it would be brilliant if you would like to support it. Number of ways you can do that. Number one is sharing it with your friends and colleagues. The more people who hear about it, the more people get to get the experience from my fantastic guests. If you want to go a bit more than that, you could jump onto wherever you listen to this and give me a review. 5 stars would be lovely. And if you want to look at throwing some cash towards me, there are a number of ways you can do that. You can pop along to the Patreon/SundayLunchPM there, or you could grab one of the books that I've published over the years and obviously get a little bit of cash from those. On the website, under the shop, under the shop, I've got links to all of my previous guests' books. Andy and Joel's is on there. And if you jump along to there, you can buy a copy of their books, and I get a little kickback from that too. And obviously, with our new headline sponsor of Tamplo, popping along, signing up, and if you end up using it, I will get a kickback there as well. So finally, obviously, as I say every time, the most important thing though is come back next time. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers. Remember, if you want better meetings and better task follow-up, Tamplo's where to get it. Don't forget your 1-month trial, tinyurl.com/Nigel Creaser Tamplo. That's NIGEL CREASER Tamplo.